Hi, this is Brian, and I thought I'd record a short session that covers the difference between different types of currencies. And by different types of currencies, I don't mean like electronic payments or physical payments or check or ATM cards, but what's the underlying basis of the currency? So I came up with a little whiteboard, and I'm going to show you that, and we'll see how that goes. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is the difference between uh, sort of a pre-currency, which some people call official or sanctioned ingots. It doesn't actually mean a currency or a coin, but it means something that has intrinsic value, but has been weighed, assessed, or officiated in some way. Um, Another type of coin, a currency, which is coins predominantly, but they have intrinsic value, unlike most of the coins we have today, which don't really have silver or gold or anything like that in it. These would have been coins that would have had intrinsic value. If you'd melted the coin, you would have gotten something useful out of it, as well as what many people call representative currencies. And then I'm going to end with talking about fiat currency, um, which means some version of, well, because I told you so. And we'll get to explaining that in a second. So let's look at some early currency. What you see on the screen right there is a little bit of a blurry picture, but it is actually a gold ingot from long time ago. I can't remember which dynasty in China. Um, but these ingots had stamps on them to validate that they actually had gold in them and that they weighed a certain amount. So this would have been in an era where people would have bartered or traded goods and services. Gold had become a means of commerce and storing value. But you need somebody, or it's useful to have somebody say, yeah, this is an official amount of gold. Those would evolve. This is a Persian uh, coin. Again, sorry, I can't remember the dates on some of these pictures. Um, but this begins to look like a coin. It has the image of a king, and but similarly, these coins would have been trusted as having said, "Oh, this has a certain amount of gold in it." Now, that trust could be valid or maybe not so valid. The Romans were famous for using gold coins and spreading them throughout their empire. But it's also true that if historians or archaeologists or people have collected those coins and found that there was a little bit of a variety in the actual amount of gold in them. But this is the intention: is we've now got a coin. It's something handed out by the government. It'll have a denomination, a picture on it, or some other kind of image that represents the government that assures you that this can be used in commerce and that it has a certain amount of intrinsic value to it. This is a slightly more modern coin. I can't remember, again, the era from this. I think this is from like the era between the 1600s to the 1800s. It's a Japanese coin. You can see by this time coins have become much more ornate. But what's really important is that these coins would have had a very specific amount of silver in them. So the government, in issuing these coins, is officiating or sanctioning that if you want to, you've got a certain amount of silver in here, and you can melt that silver down and use it for other purposes or exchange it in commerce. In fact, interestingly, the reason why the British pound sterling is called the pound is because it referred to a system used through the late Middle Ages and up through the 1800s of a pound of silver was divided up into, I think, 20 shillings and 250 pennies. So a shilling was 1/20th of a pound. and a penny was 1/240th of a pound of silver. And so during this era, when the British pound is being used, or the shilling, or the pence, that refers to an actual physical pound. It refers to the weight and measure of the coin. This actually was done in the United States as well. This is a coin from after the American Civil War, to just after, I think, the American, oh, I'm sorry, up through World War I. So from like the 1870s through the 1920s, these silver dollars had a very specific weight to them, and they had a very specific amount of silver in them. So when you got this coin, you were assured, and there were laws in place at the time, and people could test these if they wanted to by weighing them and melting them down, that you were getting a specific amount of um, uh, something of intrinsic value, silver or gold, silver in this case. Now, that moves us from the period of where we have basically uh, ingots. I'm not sure that this would really have qualified as a coin, through a transitional period of ingots and coins, through coins that actually had a genuine value relative to their content, how much silver and such that they had them, into a different era. At one time, uh, dollar bills and other dollars, or notes printed in the United States, um, were actually what were called certificates. And if you look at the wording of this very carefully, it says, "This certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury $1." And it actually says, and that what that means is $1 worth of silver. And it says $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. So you could actually take these silver certificates if you wanted to and get a silver dollar coin, or a piece of silver. More commonly in the larger denominations, you would get like an ingot or a bar of silver or gold. So this piece of paper that you hold in your hand isn't itself worth anything. It's just a piece of paper. But hopefully trustworthy organization is saying this piece of paper is backed by something that has intrinsic value, and you can get that piece of intrinsic value if you want. Now this one is 1935, and that's about the time that we started having these silver certificates. We still honor these silver certificates, but the laws changed later, when these were decirculated. They weren't demonetized, they were decirculated. And if a person brings one of these, in the United States and in other countries that did have the same practice now, if you brought it in, you just get $1. You don't get a portion of silver or anything like that. And in fact, if you actually bring this in and redeem it for $1, that probably wouldn't be a good idea, because it's worth something as a collector's item. That is different from this dollar. If you look at this dollar, which is a more modern dollar, this is a 2009 series dollar, does it say anything about there being a certain amount of silver or gold or anything else on stored at the Treasury? It doesn't say anything about that you can redeem it. Um, so at this point, the thing in front of you is not worth anything automatically, just like this isn't. But there's also not a guarantee of what is behind this. Between the 1970s and 1980s, as the US went off the gold standard, um, we don't assure you that there's a specific amount of gold. There are assets behind these, but they aren't necessarily gold or silver. And you, as a bearer of these, aren't allowed to get these. I'm sorry, you aren't allowed to get a certain amount of silver or gold. The US isn't the only country that does this. Basically, all the countries of the world do this at this point. And even the coins no longer have a certain amount of uh, intrinsic automatic value to them. This is a euro. It's an Irish euro. In the euro system, you can have coins and the notes printed in different places. Um, and this doesn't have gold or silver in it. It looks shiny like silver or gold, but it doesn't have any. I think it's made of nickel and some highly polished copper, things like that. And so these currencies are not representative of a certain amount of gold or silver or something in a treasury some way, and you're not allowed to recover them. So if we look at this range here, these are the coins which are basically ingots. They're ingots of gold, ingots of silver, things like that, these two gold ones here. And then somewhere along the way, they became coins, which are coins. They're issued by a government, but they have intrinsic value because you can weigh them and test their metal content and see that they actually have the amount of silver in them they say they have. And then we had representative currency. That dollar represents a piece of silver or gold that you're allowed to lay claim to. And now what we have are what is called fiat currency. Um, it's worth what you believe the government or the credibility of the organization that issues it to you. Now, it may seem in my little timeline here that we have automatically, through human history, gone from things of intrinsic value to things that are representative of those intrinsic value to things that are just fiat. But that's not entirely true. There are other forms of currency out there, and this is one of them, one with a bit of a notorious history. This is the South African Krugerrand. Um, and this is a specific amount of gold. It has a specific weight and a specific purity to it. It also has something of a notorious history since it was a coin that was created during the end of South Africa and the apartheid era. But these coins are still produced by the South African Reserve Bank. They limit how many can be taken out of the country and things like that. But it is a coin that has intrinsic value. So anyway, I thought I would use this to kind of show these options because when you do your payment paper, you might talk about, well, would you rather have, or do people trust more, a coin or a currency that has intrinsic value in the item? When I hand you that coin, it's a piece of gold. Or do they feel differently about it when it's a piece of paper but backed by a piece of gold? Um, or, what's the utility, the pros and cons, as it were, of a fiat currency? And then when we get later in the course and we talk about cryptocurrencies, we'll sort of extend this comparison even more.